Carolina Panthers have a busy offseason ahead of them, focusing on the defensive side of the ball, figuring out if we are going to bring in a number one wide receiver, if we can entice them to come here. But one of the things they do not have to answer a question about is Bryce Young. But as we head into 2025, I wanted to take a look back at some key statistics and changes that have happened for Bryce Young from 2023 to 2024. We can go back to 23, rehash that all we want. Frank Wright, Thomas Brown, bouncing back and forth between play callers. And unfortunately for Thomas Brown, man, he goes to Chicago, passing game coordinator, gets promoted to the interim head coach, and now is going to be looking for another job. He's had a tough break in the NFL. Absolutely tough break. I do wish him the best. But we can go back to 2023, and I think there were some assumptions. One, there was a lot of pressure for Bryce Young. His receivers didn't get open, and he didn't have a lot of time to throw. Those are kind of three metrics or things that were talked about a lot, and that has nothing to do with the skill set players around him, the performance of Bryce Young, because it wasn't great in 23. Started off bad in 24, but something has shifted. And one, the offensive line has improved, but I think some of our assumptions that some of these metrics have gotten better this year, or he has more time to throw, it may surprise you. So that's why we're spending some time today looking at NFL Pro stats. Again, you can get these yourself. I'm a subscriber. They have some really good information in here, and I want to share as much as I can. So let's dive right in. There's a lot of information on here, and this is a tiny screen, so I am going to zoom in a little bit, try to make it a little bit easier for you to view as we go through this. So let's jump right in. I've already analyzed the interceptions. I've analyzed and talked through yardage, completion percentage, passer rating, yards per attempt, like all that. All that's been discussed. What I really want to focus on is some of the key metrics that I noticed and the changes from last year to this year that may surprise you. So EPA, that's probably one of the biggest metrics out here. Again, I'm getting more familiar with this, but it's a nice metric outside of a grading system through PFF to get a player's judgment. Guess what? A positive EPA is a fantastic score. Like, that's the main takeaway that you need to understand. You need a positive EPA, or you want to have a positive EPA on every play. This goes across every position group. So negative 184 last year. He got up to negative 4. I say got up because it was trending down much worse. But overall, negative 475. And I mean, to put it in perspective, some of the best in the NFL are plus 120, plus 110 for a lot of the top end quarterbacks. I think Tua Tagovailoa, the last time I looked, was near the top of that list. So that gives you a reference point, but definitely an improvement year over year. So that is one metric that did trend. So that is one metric that did increase for Bryce Young in a positive direction. But a metric that did not and went the opposite way, it's time to throw. Now, he had 2.79 seconds to throw this year on average. Last year, he had 2.9 seconds. And a lot of times we go back and look at the 62 sacks and you said, well, he doesn't have time to throw. His receivers aren't getting open. He doesn't have separation, or the receivers don't have separation. It is wild, in my honest opinion, to see him having a decrease. And I know it's 0.10 of a second, but that's a big time difference in the NFL. When you wonder how or why this improvement worked, I do think it has to do with Dave Canales in this scheme. I do think it has to do with teaching him to get the ball out faster. Now, in the first few weeks, 2 weeks to be exact, we didn't see a lot of this. But when Bryce Young came back, as he got his feet underneath him, as he got more comfortable, as he started to trust his offensive line and start to come into his own and kind of build up his own swagger, we saw a much better performance. Now, sack number dramatically down. Now, I know he didn't play, and he played in 5 less games in 24 than he did in 23, so naturally that's going to decrease. But if you throw in 5 more games, you're still maybe, talking 40 sacks on the season, a drop of at least 20 or 22 sacks, significant improvement. Quarterback pressure number was also down from had quarterback pressure about almost 40% of the time last year on the snaps, down to 35.8%. Now let's look at a few advanced metrics here. The blitz rate. So I think this was another key metric. He was blitzed a lot. especially towards the end of the season, it felt like people thought pressure, because we saw it in the first 2 weeks. When you brought pressure, he couldn't handle it. He couldn't get the ball out. He didn't know what decision to make. And so, bam, pressure gets to him. It's a sack, it's a loss of yardage, not a good situation, or he throws a bad play, forces a turnover and interception. Quarterback, or the blitz rate for the defense, almost 35%. That's a significant improvement over last year. And again, we are seeing better play. Play action. Only 16% of the plays last year for him had play action in them. See a 5% increase this year, up to 22% of the plays have play action. Passing plays, we should say. We should clarify not just all plays, but passing plays with play action. I think going under center more, adding in a play action, and having an effective running game. Like, all three of those are complementary pieces, because if you have a bad running game, people aren't going to bite on the fake. But when you have a Chuba Hubbard who gets 1,000 yards, people have to keep you in check. They bring more players in the box. They're going to bite down. And then we're going to see situations where he rolls out or extends plays. He has the ability to make a throw. Here's kind of the metrics that really set him apart this year. Deep throws. Last year, we did not see deep shots. In the preseason, we barely did. And I'm going to say preseason, I mean like training camp. No, he didn't really play in the preseason. But preseason, first 2 games, not a lot of deep balls. Did not see really any deep balls in 23, but it's a 7.2% in 23, up to 11.5% in 2024. So again, continuing to take those shots downfield, feeling the confidence to be able to do it, and having some receivers that can go out and make it. We saw plays where he'd get pressure. He throws it up to Adam Thielen, to whoever's down there. They made some plays for him. There was also some drops. That's a significant improvement. Air yards per attempt, again, we saw a lot of throws towards the line of scrimmage, behind the line of scrimmage last year. Significant improvement in throwing to the sticks, throwing beyond the distance marker. It's elementary, but I think these are all pieces of the Dave Canales offense and just Bryce Young getting settled in that have really helped this performance. And the last two that we'll talk about, I talked about his aggressiveness, throwing into tight windows. 19.8% of his pass attempts are into a tight window. So this dude is forcing it, and to not have as many interceptions. Again, he's one of the most aggressive quarterbacks in the NFL. Maybe that does pay dividends, maybe it doesn't. But his ability to fit the ball in tight windows compared to only 11% of last year, I think shows his trust in himself and his receivers, and in a receiver core that's still kind of figuring it out outside of Adam Thielen. Last notable stat that we'll talk about, average separation. 3.1 yards this year, 3.5 yards last year. So his receivers, there's tighter windows because his receivers have less separation, or his targets, whether it's a running back, tight end, wide receiver, and he's still finding success. So I think those metrics are a big reason that paint a picture of Bryce Young from 2023 to 2024. And again, I think a lot of the credit goes to Dave Canales. Last thing we'll do, we'll break down his numbers. This is just this year between blitz and non-blitz. Again, we talked about them wanting to bring pressure. 853 yards passing against the blitz, 5 touchdowns and 1 interception, 87.7 passer rating, really good. No blitz, no pressure, 1,550 yards, 10 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. It's funny, when they don't blitz, there's more people in coverage. He's much worse as a quarterback, which is just hard to imagine. He couldn't figure it out. Passer rating, again, 79.3. We talked about yards per attempt, completion percentage. He got better. He just figured it out, man. And again, pressure, of course, you're going to have a lot more pressure when people are bringing it right in your face. But those were the numbers and stats that I wanted to highlight for Bryce Young and his performance and the growth. I'd love to know what you guys think. What do you think about the jump for Bryce Young? What do these numbers mean to you? This is Carolina Dad. Thank y'all for tuning in. Have a good one.